Today, we break down the prospect pool and the 2024 draft class of the St. Louis Blues.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. My name is Sebastian High, and I will be hosting the episode here today on my own in another solo venture, as we've been doing a decent amount this summer with Hattie taking a break today. But we have an interesting episode here today for you with our final team breakdown of the 2024 draft class and the overall prospect pool. We decided to cut it short at just 16 teams, considering that we do not have enough time or energy to cover all 32 in podcast format this offseason. So we decided to just stick with the teams that end up missing the playoffs. But before we jump into the episode here today, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Before we jump into the show here, focusing on the St. Louis Blues, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to notice I'm wearing Calgary Flames attire, whether it be the jersey or the hat. And I think that the entire hockey world has been in a state of mourning for the last couple days now. And I do not have any Columbus Blue Jackets attire to put on here today, but the losses of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew Gaudreau really rocked the entire hockey community and served as a really potent reminder to hug your loved ones, hold them close, tell them you love them, and just as potently reminding you to never drive drunk. Ever. It is never worthwhile. It is a selfish decision to make. And 2 lives have been lost as a result of that from just a couple days ago in New Jersey. And I'm going to leave a link for the GoFundMe for the family of Matthew Gaudreau, his wife, and his kid who is not yet born. And if you want to donate, as so much of the hockey world has already, we're going to try to make that as easy as possible for you all with the link at the top of the description. And while I'm sure that we could talk about this situation for longer and mourn as a collective, there are many spaces where we have been able to do that. And today we're going to try to perhaps distract ourselves slightly from the painful news by looking at prospects and doing what this podcast does very specifically, and diving deep on the young talents in today's game. And as I said, we'll be focusing on the St. Louis Blues, but I thought it would be amiss to not begin the episode here today talking a little bit about what has happened in the hockey world, because I think that every person has been affected by it in some way. And I know I myself have definitely gone for more hugs for my family in the last day than I do on average. And I definitely try to remind myself on average to do it anyways. But to close off that section, let us jump into the actual show here. So for you St. Louis Blues fans, we have a lot of prospect talk here today. We're going to start off in the first segment covering the 2024 draft class. I'll be going in through every single player, giving you a quick little breakdown of what they bring to the ice and what they may project as in the NHL eventually when they hit their peaks. In the second segment, we're going to overall look at the prospect pool and see what other gems there are in this mix, because there certainly is a decent amount of talent in the St. Louis Blues prospect pool. And finally, in the last segment, we're going to look ahead at next season, see what St. Louis is going to be trying to do next season. Are they going to be pushing for a playoff spot? And if so, which players could really help them on that project? And they're building something interesting there in St. Louis, and I'm curious to see if it's all going to come together in a playoff berth this season. But let's start off here with the 2024 draft class. The St. Louis Blues selected at 16th overall in the first round. They had 2 selections in the second round, another pair in the third, and then a single selection in the fourth and fifth, and 2 final spots in the 7th round. In the first round, they took a big swing on a wild card in this draft class, and Adam Jiricek at 16th overall. This is a player who missed a significant portion of his draft year to injury, and This is a player who's also very reliant on his edge work and his overall athleticism and moving around the ice. His actual skating mechanics are really choppy, and the fact that the injury that took him down was a really, really, really bad knee injury at the World Junior Championships in a game against Canada did not help in terms of the skepticism around his chances of cracking the NHL. While he is very physically gifted, he has a wicked shot from the point in the offensive zone. He's shown decent flashes of handling and creativity against his own age group. He has struggled massively against professional competition in the Czech Pro League. Last season, he played 19 games for HG Pilsen, and he scored a single assist and was a -10 in those games, and overall looked out of place against professional competition. He really could have used a full season against the junior ranks, and missing the back half of the season certainly did not help in that regard either. But the physical tools, he's young for the draft class, as a late June 06 birthday. There are certainly things that St. Louis is swinging on here, and tools and upside. And he was at the Hlinka a year ago. He was the best defenseman at that tournament, and he was getting a lot of top 10 hype, and he ended up falling down the draft as the season progressed on most draft boards, but still ended up going 16th overall. I think it's an interesting swing for St. Louis, perhaps not one I would have personally taken. I think there's a good amount of risk in this swing, but with a big right shot defenseman who plays extremely physically, even at 6'2", 179 pounds, this is an interesting swing to take. In the second round, they selected, with their first pick of the round, Colin Ralph, a really toolsy left shot defenseman. He's 6'5", 227 pounds, pretty old for the draft class. It's an October 05 birthday, and he was playing in the USHS prep system last season with Shattuck St. Mary's. He played 2 games at the USHL level with Dubuque, and he's making a leap to the NCAA this season with St. Cloud State University. He brings a lot to the table. He's super aggressive. He's really, really good defensively, and is able to really consistently angle off opponents, shepherd play towards the perimeter. He uses his range and his size to his advantage, and a really toolsy player. Again, a really big swing for St. Louis on a player who has played lower ranks of hockey, and but has a lot of these tools, a lot of these flashes of brilliance in his game. And I'm very curious to see how he translates to the college ranks. And then they picked another really big toolsy defenseman. I'm seeing a trend here with the Blues. They clearly want to revamp their defensive pool, and they clearly have a mold of player they like a lot. And they selected Lucas Fischer at 56th overall, one of the youngest players in the draft class, just 6 days off of the 2025 draft cutoff. And he's 6'3", 181 pounds. He's the son of Jiri Fischer, and overall, at his best, he's really mobile. He's able to combine his reach and mobility to cover really big areas on the ice, and he has a really powerful stride as well. The mobility is a big tool for him, and there have been flashes of brilliance offensively with Lucas Fischer, but the good is fantastic, and the bad is really, really rough. And he was playing with Sarnia in the OHL last season, logging 6 goals and 34 points through 68 games, also logged 79 penalty minutes. And this is a player who takes risks, and certainly got caught off quite a few times and made mistakes over the course of his draft year campaign. But the upside is phenomenal here. I think the upside is well within a second round range type of prospect, but the risk is also really significant. I think that if you're lucky, you have a 35% chance that he hits, and if he hits, maybe you get a second pairing guy who's really mobile. But if he doesn't hit, I don't think he's going to be an NHLer. But a really interesting swing, and clearly St. Louis is sticking to their guns in terms of big mobile defensemen. Then in the third round, they picked a forward, a player I like quite a bit, in Ondrej Kos. This is a 6'2" left winger, 176 pounds, very defensively responsible. He was not the most dynamic or fantastic of players in his draft year campaign, playing mainly in Mestis, which is the second pro division in Finland, for Kuvi. And he played 14 games there. He scored 3 goals, 5 points. this is overall a player who plays the game very simply but very effectively. He's a good forechecker. He's good off puck. He comes back defensively to support play, and overall is able to make a difference in all three zones of the ice. He's a good like one-touch, two-touch player. He doesn't want to carry the puck up himself too much, but a really effective off-puck guy who I think could crack a bottom six at some point in his career. Next, they picked Adam Jiricek, who fell in the draft relative to where I think many of us expected him to go, considering that he is 6'5", 201 pounds. He's a right shot. He can play center or on the wing. Probably on the wing in the NHL in terms of projection. And he was playing with the Edmonton Oil Kings in the WHL last season, scoring 23 goals and 47 points. He's really big. He's a power forward. He's a really powerful skater. At his best, he combines a high level of skill and puck handling ability with that pure physicality and the inside drive. And he can be a real game changer. But there have been many games where he just fades into the background and struggles to make a real impact and make a difference in any of the three zones on the ice. So this is a big swing on the tools. The raw upside, again, might not hit, but I like this for St. Louis. They're going for size, certainly, but they're going for skill and they're going for upside. And Adam Jiricek, I thought he could have been potentially selected in the first round. I wouldn't have done it, but I thought that there was a chance of that happening. And so to get a player like him in the third round is certainly decent value. Then they picked up Thomas Mercick from, last season he was playing with the Medicine Hat Tigers. He's since been traded to the Prince Albert Raiders. And this is a really skilled player. I really like the way that he thinks the game. He's pacey. He's 6 feet, 170 pounds, left shot, center/winger, probably a winger again at the NHL level, but he has a really heavy shot, really quick release. He's packed with deception, and he's constantly trying to outthink and outmaneuver opponents. He scored 23 goals and 62 points in 63 WHL games last season on that packed Medicine Hat team, and I think that he was a clear third-round talent at bare minimum. So to land him in the fourth round is great value, and I think that St. Louis continues to do well here on draft day. Next, they picked up William McIsaac, another big right shot defenseman, 6'3", 192 pounds. Another WHLer. They clearly like the WHL guys here in the mid rounds this year, and he was playing with the Spokane Chiefs last season. He scored 6 goals and 27 points through 67 games. He's pretty mobile as well on top of his size. He can pick up speed pretty well. He's able to match footwork off the rush, but overall, I think a pretty like meat and potato style of defender, and not a player that probably projects as a top 4 guy long term. But when you're picking in the fourth round, that's not really what you are targeting. Then finally, in the 7th round, with the last 2 selections on draft day, St. Louis went out and picked out of the QMJHL Antoine Dorion, a 6'1", 190-pound right shot forward. He scored 11 goals and 26 points last season with the Quebec Ramparts in a depth role, and clearly St. Louis thinks that that he will be able to pop next season. This is Pierre Dorion's son, and we'll see if the hockey lineage is able to carry him up that far. But as of right now, this is one of your 7th round swings, and clearly he's a prospect that they believe in, and also in a system in Quebec that is really made to breed professional style players that want to win and give their all every single shift. With the final pick for the St. Louis Blues, they selected Matvei Kuroki at 211th overall in the 7th round, a 6'1", 198-pound right shot centerman who played in the MHL last season in the SKA St. Petersburg system. He was a teammate of Ivan Demidov's for a decent stretch that year, obviously, and in 51 games, he scored 20 goals and 38 points. He's a pretty good shot. That's his best offensive tool, and he has some power forward elements in his game. He's already really stocky, but clearly just a big swing on a couple tools on a player that is that has been playing alongside some fantastically skilled players, and was a bit more of a depth piece in that SKA system, because you don't really need to rely on your depth guys when you have Ivan Demidov at the MHL level in his draft year season. But that wraps up the overall breakdown of the prospects. I think overall this is a strong draft class. I'd give it a B+ grade. I think there's a lot of intelligent swings here on a combination of tools and physicality, and overall a couple like specific things in their toolkits that made them stand out from just your average draft eligible player. They were not just going in to fill bodies in their lineup down the road. They were targeting a very specific mold of player, and I think it was an interesting class as a whole. I have a lot of questions around Adam Jiricek's value at 16th overall, but I think it could pay off, certainly if he's able to bounce back this season, but definitely a bigger risk. But it's one of those swings that you just got to take when you're picking the middle of the first round. And St. Louis has been targeting forwards in recent seasons to go for big defensemen with some real hockey lineage. Obviously, his brother David is a top prospect in Columbus's prospect pool. Is quite interesting. But that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we're going to break down the overall prospect pool for St. Louis. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here. If you want last-minute tickets, Game Time is the place to be. With Game Time, you can get awesome last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on whatever event you are interested in attending, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, whatever it is that you are interested in, Game Time has you covered. Game Time also offers awesome zone deals where you pick the zone or the section and Game Time selects the seat for you for added potential savings, especially if you have a really tight schedule and something opens up for you last minute where you have some time to go out and do something fun, to treat yourself to an event. Game Time is exactly what you need. Game Time also gives you a lowest price guarantee. If you find a better price than what is listed on Game Time, just have to show that receipt to Game Time and you will get 110% of the difference in order to go with Game Time to your event. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's jump right back into the episode here and break down the overall prospect pool for St. Louis. There's a decent amount of quality in this group, especially among the forward core. And let's jump right into that with perhaps the top forward prospect period in this prospect pool in Jimmy Snuggerud, a player who's going back to the NCAA for a third and likely final season with the University of Minnesota. He was their first round selection in 2022, 23rd overall, and he's been developing really, really nicely. Yeah, he's had back-to-back strong campaigns in the NCAA, scoring 50 and 34 points respectively. He scored 21 goals in both of those seasons, and he's a 6'2", 187-pound right shot right winger who is able to contribute a lot, whether it be with a high work rate. He's a really high motor. He plays with physicality and grit. He has a wicked shot. He's an underrated playmaker. There's a lot of deception and intelligence that permeates his overall game. And I think that he has significant top six upside at the NHL level, and also a stylistic player that I think will benefit St. Louis's lineup significantly as soon as he joins that fray. They also have Dalibor Dvorsky, who was their first round pick a year ago at 10th overall in 2023. And he's been developing very nicely in the OHL since making that switch. He started off last season as a D+1 in the SHL, but after scoring 0 points in 10 SHL games for IK Oskarshamn, he made a transfer to the OHL with the Sudbury Wolves, where he ended up scoring 45 goals and 88 points through 52 games, while also still being a plus level defensive impact. He's a decent puck handler, has a hard shot. He's a good two-way centerman, and overall, he has a really good mix of tools. He's physical, he's strong, he can play with grit, he can get to the inside. He has a really wicked shot. That's a massive scoring threat, and I think that he's a really intriguing prospect. Does he have top-line upside? I have my doubts, but in terms of a prospective second-line center long-term, I think he's a fantastic fit in this prospect pool. Otto Stenberg's another really interesting player who's really speedy, very, very skilled, and he's been developing in Sweden. He's going over to the Malmö Redhawks this year after playing last year with Frölunda in the SHL, scoring 3 goals and 6 points through 31 games. And he'll be looking to take a step with also a bit more workload on his back because he is such a good offensive player, whether it's the goal scoring or the playmaking, he can do it all. Zachary Dean's another interesting forward prospect who they acquired from the Vegas Golden Knights just over a year ago. Yuri Pekarchuk has been really developing nicely since being drafted a year ago in the 3rd round after having scored 9 goals and 59 points through 43 USHL games this past year, and he'll be making a leap to the Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL this year, so keep your eye out for that. Quentin Burns is an interesting defensive prospect who's been chipping away in the background with the Kingston Frontenacs as a pretty reliable two-way left shot defenseman at 6'1", 185 pounds. Beyond that, I mean, again, among the forwards, we've already mentioned some of the 2024 drafted players, but I think Thomas Mercick, Adam Yeko, and Ondrej Kos definitely deserve their mention in this section, as certainly does Zachary Bolduc. There's a lot of decent quality and depth in the forward prospect pool. Moving on to the defenseman, obviously we already talked about Quentin Burns, but Theo Lindstein was picked a year ago in the first round. He's kind of a do-it-all type of defenseman who's decent at everything, not outstanding at any particular thing, which I think could be a real hurdle in his development towards the NHL, and especially in a top four capacity long term, but clearly a player that St. Louis believes in. Adam Jiricek, we already talked about in depth. Michael Buchinger is a player that I've always had a real appreciation for. I've watched him live a lot in the OHL in my days living in Ottawa and catching a lot of 67s games, and whenever he and the Guelph Storm were in town, he stood out positively. He's a mobile two-way defenseman who plays intelligently and takes calculated risks in activating offensively while still being able to get back defensively. He's not massive or anything, but a really solid two-way piece who I think could be a really good number 5 defenseman long term. Colin Ralph, as we said, was already a good player as well. Same thing with Lucas Fisher in terms of a project pick. And moving on to the goaltenders. The only two of note in the prospect pool, this is a real area of weakness for the St. Louis Blues in terms of who they have coming in from the ranks. Vadim Zherenko and Will Cranley are probably the two most notable names here. Will Cranley is the one that I'm more familiar with. He was in Ottawa 67 for a full season when I was watching games very regularly, and he's a decent player. He was picked in the third round a couple years ago. I don't really see a massive NHL future, but in terms of being a potential AHL starter in a couple of years' time, I think that there's potential there. So as a whole, I think that this is a prospect pool that has a couple areas of real weakness, in net being the clear one. I think they need some more offensive punch on their blue line. Guys like Adam Jiricek might be very hyped up, but I think the overall offensive upside is a lot lower than the overall defensive upside with a lot of this overall defensive prospect pool. Lastly, maybe adding in one more elite skill type of winger. The best winger prospect here is Jimmy Snuggerud, but adding a bit more dynamism into that fold I think could be very helpful. Of course, St. Louis already has a couple dynamic pieces in their NHL lineup today, but adding some more, I think, could really go a long way to help propel this team into regular playoff contention. But that wraps up this second segment. In the final one, we're going to look ahead at next season and see what the expectations for this team are going to be and what we can expect from some specific young players in their lineup. Alrighty, let's wrap the show up here in the final segment by looking ahead at next season for the St. Louis Blues. The Blues are going to have an influx of young talent this season, with Jake Neighbors taking another step in his development, potentially playing top-line minutes alongside Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. He scored 27 goals last season and was a really important depth producer for this team, especially in the goal-scoring element, and I think that he will be able to take another step in his development. I don't know if he's going to hit 30 goals this year, but at least in terms of playing more minutes and getting a bit bigger of a workload and getting accustomed to playing a consistent top 6 role at the NHL level. Beyond him, Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg are the two big offseason additions for this team, with a double offer sheet against the Edmonton Oilers. Which I think was a really intelligent move for St. Louis. Sure, they are overpaying Philip Broberg for the season in all likelihood, as he's making $4.5 million for the next 2 seasons, but he is a really talented, mobile two-way defenseman who is one of the better skaters already in the entire league, and he showed in the playoffs for Edmonton that he's able to play middle pairing minutes in the Stanley Cup Finals, and he was the better player on that second pairing. I think he outshone a lot of more established players in that Edmonton lineup down the stretch in the playoffs, whether it be Darnell Nurse, for instance. But I think that he's going to be a really important piece here for St. Top, and there's a lot of room for him to move up in the lineup, whether he starts on a third pairing or a second. I think he'll be able to also leapfrog Nick Leddy to play top pairing minutes alongside Colton Parayko this year. And As for Dylan Holloway, I think that there's a lot of options with him this season. Sure, you can play him on the third line and he will be playing that role fantastically. He's a really good two-way centerman. He works very hard. He's a really quick skater. He plays with power, and he's gotten a lot more direct in his overall game, which I really appreciated. He's not the most skilled offensive player, but he's a really decent shooter from in tight. He's able to score off the rush. He finds small gaps and is able to exploit defenses with just beating them with his intelligence. And I think that he'll also be able to play middle six and potentially even top 6 minutes this season. But he was a really good get here for St. Louis, and he's definitely a style of player that I think they really needed to add into the fold. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing those players take steps in their development this season. As for the overall playoff hopes for this lineup, I think a lot of it's going to come down to goaltending. We're going to see how the crease and the split is going to look like this season. Obviously, Jordan Binnington's been a starter for quite a while in St. Louis, but Joel Hofer made a really big push for the starters crease last season. I thought that he was miles better than Binnington for the entirety of that year, basically. And I would love to see him take over the number 1 slot permanently in St. Louis, but we're going to see if he's ready for that jump or not. And of course, maybe Binnington is able to jump back to potentially peak form this year, but I think that a lot's going to hinge on the crease, as it does for a lot of NHL teams that are right on the brink of playoff contention. But beyond that, I think a lot of the burden's just going to fall on Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas again in terms of generating offense. Same thing with Pavel Buchnevich, probably playing on a second line and really being able to add some more depth production to the mix. There's a lot of players here that are going to have to play up to their level, and if any one of them underperforms significantly, I think the chances of playoff contention drop pretty swiftly. Beyond that, I think that gaining a bit more stability with these new additions like Holloway, like Broberg, these are young players that haven't really had full NHL seasons under their belts in terms of playing big minutes just yet. And taking that next step in their development, I think, is going to be key for St. Louis. If Broberg is able to settle himself into being a very clear top 4 defenseman, and Dylan Holloway is able to play very reliable middle 6 minutes, contributing on potentially both special teams units as well, I think that this team will certainly get a significant boost. But again, this is also a team that's going to be getting a lot of influx of talent in the next couple seasons, especially at forward, with guys like Jimmy Snuggerud, like Dalibor Dvorsky making the leap to the NHL. I don't think they're going to take very long. They're both pretty refined prospects, and once they enter the fold, I think St. Louis will be in a better position to take that big step towards the playoffs. But as things stand right now, I wouldn't really back their chances massively this season, but they definitely have enough pieces in their lineup to make that push and to catch some other teams off guard and to kind of be an underdog and a dark horse in that Western Conference playoff race this season. But finally, in this segment, let's talk through just a couple point projections for some of the young players in this team. There aren't too many young players in the team, obviously, but we can focus on the ones that are there already. Starting off with Jake Neighbors, I think that hitting the 25 goal mark, as well as perhaps hitting 55, 60 points would be really helpful in his development. I have a couple doubts of him hitting the 30 goal mark, 35 goal mark. I would love it if he did. He has a wicked shot. He's so good at just taking tiny pockets of space and converting them into goals when he's around the net. And he has some really interesting power elements in his game as well that I really appreciate. But I think that if he's able to maybe bump up his assist tally a little bit, which would obviously be helped if he is playing on that top line alongside Thomas and Kyrou, I think that would be really great for his development. But we're going to see how he ends up producing. As for Dylan Holloway, I think if he's playing middle 6 minutes, you can see 20 goals, 35 points out of him this season, especially if he gets some power play 2 time. I'm not sure if he starts there to begin the year, but he might move up into that slot as the year progresses. If injuries arise, if he's able to progress in his development offensively, and obviously could also play on the penalty kill for St. Louis. Finally, Philip Broberg, I think, could also chip in with 5 goals and 20 points from the blue line. He's a really good puck mover. The overall offensive implication and the creativity in the offensive zone is still coming together, but the tools are there. The flashes of brilliance are there. And I mean, if he's able to take a big leap in production and score 35 plus points this year, I think that St. Louis will be well on their way to pushing for those wild card spots this year. But finally, we're going to finish off here with the goaltender. And as I kind of teased in the last little part here, I think Joel Hoffer is going to be a starter this year for St. Louis. And I think that in 45 games, he might put up a 9-12 save percentage, something around that number. I think that he's going to be solid, have a couple of games that are pretty rough, but overall is able to bring consistency to the crease and really grow in his own development, taking a stride from young developing goaltender into just perpetual NHL day in, day out player. And I'd love to see him take that step. But that wraps up this final segment for us. And with that, the episode. If you enjoyed and you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to comment any stories or memories that you have of either Johnny or Matthew Gaudreau that you want to leave in the comment section here today. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news show on YouTube that brings you all the sporting news you could possibly want to have access to. And my name is Sebastian High, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh. We're both now working over at Elite Prospects this season. And that wraps up the show here today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you tune back in very shortly.